Hi everyone. It is unbelievable how much there can be when talking about what are we thinking. So that we don't get lost, what did we talk about in the session? What to direct our attention or our thinking to? Evaluation, and that we looked at elements in order of importance. That we proceed by addressing what demands immediate attention before continuing with less urgent matters in the position. And that we turned that organized thinking into a mental habit. That was the main topic, organized thinking habit. However, to show it, we did a think walkthrough on 2 examples. And in doing that, we learned how the evaluation can tell us what the position demands. On this lab, we will finish the thinking topic, then add to the evaluation topic some. Then we will solve the session exercise, test, and what do you notice positions. Welcome, chess masters. Here is an infographic of what we discussed in the session. We suggested an area to direct our thinking was evaluation, ideally looking at elements in order of importance and addressing what demands immediate attention before continuing with less urgent matters. We suggest the approach not just for the sake of thinking prairie. We follow it in an attempt to determine which elements are significant in a particular position and what side has an advantage, if that's the case, to understand what is going on in the position. The expectation is that it should help us find good moves during a game, avoid blunders, and being more efficient with our time. Let me add a few more things about the thinking topic. Is it too early to talk about thinking? For players in the 400, 1200 over the board range? My view is that it is preferable that we know and learn about it early on rather than later, to encourage, off the gate, good thinking habits. But it is a lot to bear in mind, I agree. I can only do one thing at a time during a game, either thinking, playing, or pressing the clock. Oftentimes I see players forget pressing their clock after making their move. So where to start the habit at my level? It is difficult to tell because we do both, evaluate and choose a move when playing, but a good start is to enforce the second point below. Addressing opponent's threats, attacks first, then continue with your own threats and attacks. When you reach around 1500 over the board ELO, ask an experienced coach or trainer for help on following a thought process, especially for competitive chess as you go above 1700 over the board ELO. Here are some lab thinking exercises. In this position, after replacing the black knight with a black pawn, then a black rook, then a black queen, for each, note down whether you followed your thinking habit to choose your move. Let me now talk about the chess part of the session. The examples we looked at, one was on how to proceed, decide between promoting a passed pawn versus stopping a mate threat, where black addressed the more urgent matter first by playing bishop c5. The second example was to illustrate how changing the position of the king or vulnerability changes the evaluation, oftentimes significantly. Lab quiz question. Why in this channel is king position or vulnerability at the top of the list of elements to evaluate? Give it some thought and write down your answer. We will answer at the end of the lab. Let me say a few additional things about evaluation. If I sounded repetitive when doing the evaluations, it was intentional so you could see how habit could be achieved. It isn't easy to create a mind or thinking habit. The goal is getting it to the point that it comes natural to you or your mind, like walking or like breathing, so that the organized thinking itself does not get in the way of our playing the game. If you saw, when evaluating, I counted material even after stating the checkmate sequence on this position. What for, if it is checkmate? Absurd, right? Right. That shows why in this channel, importance of material imbalance is placed after king vulnerability and threats and attacks. King vulnerability or threats and attacks against the king can tell you more about what's really going on in the position than material could tell you. Also, did we know there was a forced mate sequence in that position beforehand? Not really. It is up to you which element you do first or focus on first. Sometimes body count is the first thing our mind does. Sometimes we, our brain, sees the forced mate sequence in the position right away without blinking. So our mind no longer looks at other elements. Why is that? Our pattern recognition or familiarity with the position or experience is the culprit. It is those priors Grandmaster Cry talked about in his video about the two ways chess players think during a game. So, pattern recognition helps us. It influences or dictates the elements our mind focuses on first, from what we see on the board. Mind you, it happens extremely fast. So, you very quickly know the element to focus on and what moves need to be played or considered. Failing pattern recognition, we need to go into what-if mode and calculate moves to confirm validity of our thoughts or ideas. Let us now dive into the session exercise. This position comes from the blog post Intuition is a Powerful Thing by Grandmaster Eugene Perelshteyn. Following what we discussed in the session, evaluate the position and determine how should black proceed. We will do 3 runs. First, we will do our usual evaluation, looking at elements in order of importance. Then, I will share what went through my mind when I looked at this same position the very first time, trying to figure out what is going on. Just a readout of what went through my mind to see how my thoughts really traveled, so to speak. And third, I will share Grandmaster Eugene Perelshteyn's post telling what went through his mind when actually playing this position over the board and what happened in the game. Let's start. King position, vulnerability or exposure. I see white's king is safer than black's. It has better cover than black's. Neither king is facing immediate problematic checks or mate threats. Okay. What about threats and attacks in the position? White is attacking the e5 pawn 4 times. White is attacking the knight on b4 with the bishop. The knight is guarded. Black is attacking the d5 pawn with the knight and bishop. No other attacks at the moment. These are white's attacks. These are black's attacks. And this is another white attack. Is white threatening capturing on e5 with knight takes e5? Sacrificing a knight for 2 pawns? Possibly yes, because after knight takes e5, d takes e5, bishop takes e5, this would open lines towards the black king. It would allow queen h5 and also would allow pushing the d5 pawn to activate the c4 bishop. Black isn't threatening anything at the moment. What is the material imbalance? Material is equal. Both sides have a queen, 2 rooks, 3 minor pieces, and 6 pawns. Is there a lead in development? Yes. White is fully developed, whereas black has yet to bring its queenside rook on a8 into the game. Is there a passed pawn? There are no passed pawns in the position, however. Black has the possibility of creating one with the f5 and e5 pawns. Let me point out a factor in this position we don't yet know about that have some influence in the position, just so you are aware. Black's weak squares around his king. We, however, will do our assessment with the elements we know. Black's king is somewhat weak or vulnerable. White's pieces are all active and ready for action, whereas black's aren't. Particularly, white's rooks are already doubled, whereas black's are disconnected. Black's only plus at the moment is his pawn duo, which in an endgame could potentially create a passed pawn. So, black should consider moves that improve his king safety, or moves that bring the a8 rook into the game. Moves like rook g8 come to mind. Rook f6, not as much because it blocks the guard of the e5 pawn. Queen e7, connecting the rooks, has the drawback of allowing the sacrifice on e5, exposing the black queen to the white rook's attack. Possibly rook c8, with the idea of rook c7 and then rook f7. Bishop c8, with the idea of rook a7 and rook f7. That is the answer to the exercise. Black should reinforce its king's defense and be mindful of the possibility of a sacrifice on e5 and the weak squares h5, g6, plus the possible continuations for black from here. Okay, let me now share what went through my mind when I looked at this position. After only reading Eugene saying he felt he was better because of the pawn duo and his strong knight on b4, I was like, really? Why is that strong? Let me look. I wrote down as much as I could remember afterwards. The very first thing that came to my eyes was the 2 pawns on f5 and e5. The very next thing that came to mind was the move e4 to kick the knight on f3. So I looked at where could that knight go if I played e4. I saw it would have to go back to d2 likely. Also realizing that after e4, white could capture on g7. And verified after bishop takes g7, king takes g7, there is no issue for black's king. Then I paid attention at the knight on b4. So it is attacking the d5 pawn together with the bishop on b7. Realizing there was no way to add attackers to it. This means the question, how can I attack it more, crossed my mind. I looked at move bishop a6 to see if the b7 bishop could do more for me, but I saw nothing clear. Then I looked at possible moves, queen e8, instead of pawn e4, with the idea of playing queen g6 or queen h5, bringing the queen to the king side, but did notice white could play knight h4, stopping that idea. After queen e8, white would play knight h4, and the queen guards this square, and the knight guards this square. Then I thought, let me look at the elements that we are supposed to look at first. That is when I looked at the king position and realized white's king is safer than black's. Particularly realized the square g6 and f5 were weak, and they could be targeted by the knight h4 move. That's when I realized the black queen is tied to control the square h4. And also that black's king was unsafe. The possibility of knight takes e5 then crossed my mind. Since I cannot move the black queen, then I looked at the rooks and saw black's rooks weren't connected, whereas white's are already doubled on the e file. Particularly, so the a8 rook wasn't participating in the game. So I thought, what if rook a7? Weird move, I thought. Or what if rook f7? With the idea of doubling my rooks on the f file. That is as much as I could remember. I don't remember what else I thought afterwards, but I was done very much at that point, concluding that black's king was in trouble and that white was intending to sacrifice on e5. I don't remember me deciding or settling for the rook a7 move, but noticed that rook a7 could be followed by bishop c8. A quicker way than getting the queen out of the way to double the rooks on the f file and defend f5. Masters, the difference between looked and realized is huge. Look this up in the dictionary to learn. Let me now share Grandmaster Eugene Perelshteyn's post describing his evaluation of the position when actually playing this game over the board and what happened in the game. The link to his post will be in the description of this lab. Read it entirely to learn more about intuition. This is his opponent, a game from the Reykjavik Open 2017, where he faced Pragananda's older sister, Vaishali. It is black to move, and I will just quote his description. I took over the initiative and executed the standard f5 break earlier. Black has nice f5 and e5 pawns with a strong knight on b4. I felt like I was better, but couldn't quite find the correct plan. I wasted too much time trying to connect my rooks with queen e7, which I correctly rejected due to a strong piece sacrifice, knight takes e5. And I played the game move queen d7 instead. Unfortunately, I completely missed knight h4, after which my king side collapses as both rook h3 and queen h5 are coming. The game didn't last long and she finished me off without any chances. Later, the analysis confirmed that my intuition was indeed correct, and the best way to activate my rooks was playing rook a7. The idea is to drop the bishop to c8, so the rook could be activated on the 7th rank. The modern engine confirms and gives black a slight edge. And just to conclude, that was his description of his analysis of this position. And just to conclude this thing about intuition, I will quote 2 more paragraphs of his post. Conclusion: trusting your inner radar. In both of these examples, my initial feeling about the position was absolutely correct. My inner radar was pinging, telling me exactly what the board demanded. Yet, instead of trusting my Grandmaster intuition, I let fear and overcalculation take the wheel. I played it safe, and I paid the price. This brings us back to Kasparov's discovery. Through years of solving puzzles, reading books, and playing games, you are building a massive mental database of chess patterns. In the heat of a tournament game, under the intense focus we talked about earlier, your subconscious often spots the truth of a position before your conscious brain can calculate all the variations. So that is Grandmaster's Perelshteyn's description of his evaluation, analysis of this game, and how he lost the game because of not trusting his intuition and not playing the moves it was suggesting for him. Let us take a quick look of the moves that happened in the game. He said that he played in the game Queen d7, and after that, this is a bad move or a mistake because White played Knight h4, attacking the f5 pawn, controlling the weak g6 square, and threatening to bring the white queen into the king side. The game continued. Bishop a6, b3, defending the bishop on c4, bishop takes, pawn takes, queen f7. And from here, if you take a look at the evaluation of this position with the engine, it gives an evaluation of 1.9, 2.0 for white. Because of the attack that will develop against the black king. Let us look quickly at the moves that should have been played for black to keep the balance. Instead of queen d7, the move rook a7 was the correct move to make, after which the evaluation is 0.0 or minus 0.5 for black. After rook a7, if the white knight jumps to h4, it will be captured. So there is no longer a possibility of attacks on the black king with the knight and the rook and the queen. And if white decides to sacrifice on e5, the sacrifice no longer works because black has defensive resources. After knight takes, d takes on e5, bishop takes, there is bishop takes d5, bringing the bishop into play and the rook to the defense of the black king. So that is how black should have continued in this game. What can we learn or draw from all this? Let me mention some. Regarding thinking, Just because it happened to me doesn't mean it will happen to you. But how our thinking can easily go and will go sideways. How late, so to speak, I came to start thinking in the suggested orderly manner. Our intuition can help us or get in the way. Not easy to control intuition, but at least we should learn when to listen to it and when not to. In this game, Eugene's intuition was correct on the way to proceed. Regarding evaluation, the difficulty of recognizing which factors are the significant ones. Eugene does not mention anything about his own king situation. He realized about it only after knight h4 attacked the weak squares around his king. No easy guideline to address this, however. Learning from own past games helps also. Being mindful, being more objective when judging, being sensitive to danger can also help. Notice how the square weaknesses are not mentioned in Eugene's assessment, or how close his king was to danger. Instead, for him, it was the f5, e5 pawn duo and strong knight on b4 that were the relevant factors and the reason he felt being better. Somewhat understandable, because who likes to accept or recognize there is weaknesses in his or her position? And if they are not obvious, he mentions he couldn't find the correct plan. I wonder if this may be an indicator that we are just considering the wrong factors as relevant in the position. From this point on, we will also consider weaknesses as an element of evaluation in this channel. What weaknesses? Square or pawn weaknesses? Remember, weaknesses are a fantastic target of attack. Let us now look at the session test position. In this position, it is white to move. White played rook c3. What is the threat? If you found what the threat is in this position, congrats. Add a comment in the lab. After repeating the same thing for quite a while now, at this point we know what to look at right away, or where to direct our attention to in this position after white's move. And that is our king exposed or vulnerable after rook c3? What is rook c3 threatening? Let us look for any direct attacks to the king. Means, are there any checks? Yes, knight f5 is a direct attack to the king. Check. Okay, is there a way out of it? Well, yes, g6 takes f5, but it is the only way to get out of check. Is the king exposed to any checks after capturing the knight? Or exposed to possible mate threats after capturing? Yes, rook h3 check is a check, but the king would escape through g7. Okay, what if white blocks the escape square, playing rook g1 first instead of rook h3 check? Remember what we said in the checkmate session. Checkmate is about trapping the king. Then the move rook h3 would be made if rook g1 is played first. Rook g1 would pose a mate threat, which we could not stop. Then the move rook c3 poses two threats: an immediate attack to the king, knight h5, which after capturing the knight, there is no other choice, black would have to capture the knight. An upcoming mate threat appears on the board, for which there would be no defense The upcoming mate threat would be rook g1, which threatens rook h3 mate. After recognizing the threat, you want to address it. How to address the threat after rook c3? Move the king away so that if the direct attack knight h5 check happens, it can hide away. That means playing king g7. That's a good way to respond to rook c3. In the game, black played b takes c4 and lost the game. Addressing unstoppable upcoming mate threats is very important in chess, after which white played knight f5 check. This is controlled by the bishop, and the knight controls the g7 square, so the black king cannot escape. It is forced, taking on f5. And then, instead of the check move allowing the king to escape, white played rook g1. And now there is no defense against rook h, the upcoming mate threat, rook h3 mate. Okay, let me answer the lab quiz. Why in this channel is king position or vulnerability at the top of the list of elements to evaluate? Because it is a very sensitive element that can significantly influence the evaluation of a position. That's simple. Let us now move on to the what do you notice position. The endgame study by Alexei Troitsky. I don't have the year of publication, unfortunately. If you know that, please leave a comment. Thanks. What do you notice in this position? Do you notice material is equal? Do you notice the bishops run on the same square color? Do you notice both sides have a passed pawn? Do you notice both bishops are on the way of its own passed pawn at the moment? Did you notice black's passed pawn promotion square is a dark square, whereas white's passed pawn promotion square is a light square? Do you notice white's passed pawn is closer to promotion than black's? Do you notice black's bishop could move out of the way with check, which gains tempo, whereas white's bishop does not have that luxury? Do you notice white's bishop is controlling the diagonal coinciding with the promotion square of its pawn? The obvious plan for both sides is to push their own pawn closer to the promotion square and try to promote before the opponent does. So time is of essence here. Let's start with getting the pawns closer to the promotion square. That means after the moves a6, c4, a7, c3. Now what? It appears white must make a move with his bishop. But where to? Black will respond by giving check and then advance his pawn to the 7th rank. Both sides will promote at the same time, resulting in a draw. White needs to make a bishop move that gains a tempo. And here is the unbelievable move white made in this position. Bishop h1. Excellent move. After bishop h1, two things are achieved. First, if black captures the bishop, then white promotes its pawn with check and will be able to stop black's pawn and win the game. Second, if black does not capture the bishop and continues with the plan of moving his bishop away with check and then push its pawn, then white will promote to queen first and pose an immediate mate threat if black plays bishop a4 check. White would play king f7, and then if black plays c2, white would play pawn to a8, promote to queen, and pose a mate threat on g2. So, what does black play after bishop h1? Bishop a4 check, king f7, and now black has an interesting move here. Bishop c6, good move, stops the white pawn from promoting, deflects the white bishop to prevent the mate threat. This move also threatens capturing the white bishop and push its pawn to c2. So in this situation, white plays forced bishop takes c6. There was no better move for white. Then black plays c2. Now if you see, there will be no mate threat on g2 after promoting. But white promotes anyway. a8 equals queen. c1 equals queen. And now what? White is up a piece and has the move. What should white do? Simple. Look for a way to deliver checkmate. Is it possible? Let us see. What attacking move is good for white? There are three possible attacking moves. Queen a2, check. Queen b8, check. And queen h8, check. White plays queen a2, check. This move coordinates well with the bishop on c6. Now, if the black king goes to g1, the move queen g2 would be made. The moves queen b8 check or queen h8 check are not good, because after those moves, the king moves away, the black king moves away, and there is no more useful checks for white. So the right move is queen a2 check. The king moves away to a safe square where it will not be mated immediately. King g3. But now white has this move, queen g2 check. King f4. Now queen f3 check. King g5 and queen g3 check. King f5. Now queen g6 check. This move, queen g6 check, is possible because the white king went to the safe square f7 after black played bishop a4 check a few moves back. So it was very important deciding what square to move the king to. Now black loses either way. Its king goes to e5, queen f6 is mate, or if it goes to f4, white plays queen h6 check. Black loses its queen and the game. Tactical blows and mate threats can also appear on positions with only very few pieces on the board. If you did notice all these factors in the position or managed to solve the study, congrats! I hope you found the study instructive. Okay, what do we have after all these sessions in the channel? We now have some knowledge, some understanding. We know why we want to evaluate and what it does for us in a game. And finally, we know of a way to go about thinking during a game. What is next from here? It is now time to play chess and put this knowledge, understanding, and skills into practice in your own games, plus analyzing your games afterwards to learn what you did right and what you did wrong. Also, solving exercises will help you grow your mental database of patterns. To summarize very briefly, if it helps any, and I may be stating the obvious here, an evaluation is more about understanding and criteria, whereas addressing threats or attacks is more about seeing and finding a concrete moves. Also, both evaluation as well as intuition are very helpful to play well. With experience, you will learn when to listen to one or the other. Let me know in the comments if you found this discussion helpful. Thank you very much for watching. Like the video, share it with chess friends and family, and subscribe to the channel. Start your healthier lifestyle now. Get a 15% discount on your entire order online at glowandgo.herbalife.com. Good luck on your next games and never stop learning. Take care.